we start off with yet another episode of Discourse, an archive of ideas. This initiative is curated by the Economic Society of SRCC with the aim to construct opinions and the growth among the students. The main initiative is to invite eminent personalities of different backgrounds to speak on relevant issues such that the students grow a different perspective towards the world and the happenings around them.
Okay.
A corporate mogul back then and now a bestseller author, Mr. Gurcharan has achieved it all. With wearing so many hats, he doesn't need a proper introduction. We are honored to have you here with us, sir.
Thank you.
So, starting off with the questions. At the end of 1994, after a career spanning of 30 years, you left on yet another expedition, writing.
Right.
What rationale did you have while retiring early? As the students from SRCC, each and everyone aspires to be in the top flight of the corporate world. Yet retiring at such an early age, what rationale did you have to do the same?
Well, I'll tell you, one, I had worked, I retired at 50, and I had already worked for 30 years. And I had already become a CEO at 37. So I'd already been a CEO of P&G India, plus of Southeast Asia for P&G. And so I was given, I left to go to I was asked to come to the world headquarters to run global strategy. That was the job. Okay. And so I'd kind of reached in the top 10 in the company. Okay. And so one day I came to work and I saw this pile of papers on my desk every morning. They were basically market share reports from around the world of our major brands. And I said to myself, there must be another bigger world outside. Besides, here I was looking at the market share of Pampers, Tide detergent, Oil of Olay, Vicks Vapor Rub, Pantene shampoo, Always sanitary napkins, Whisper here, and all very good brands. They were leading brands, Gillette blades. And I got depressed because I thought that, there should be something else that I should be doing with my life. And so I came home that evening and my wife said, you look depressed. And so I told her that what I was thinking, and she said, you're just having a midlife crisis, everything will be all right tomorrow. Well, the fact is it didn't get all right tomorrow. And so I sat down with my wife and I showed her how much savings we had. It's a spreadsheet. I put a spreadsheet for her and how much income we could get from our savings, and that I tried to persuade her that we had enough and that our standard of living wouldn't go down too much, but it wouldn't go up after this. And so, there wouldn't be a yacht and a private plane and all those things. And so anyway, she was a good sport, and we came back to India, where I became a full-time writer. Now, the decision to become a writer was not an accidental one. That it started very early in my 20s. In fact, soon after college, I knew that I enjoyed writing. And so my friends in the corporate world played golf, and I wrote. And for 30 years, I had weekends of writing behind me. And so I'd written 3 plays. One of them had won a prize, another one had been performed off Broadway, a third one was traveling all over India called Nine Jaku Hill. And they were published, they had been performed. And so I'd had a fair amount of success, but also confidence. It built my confidence. And in my 30s, I wrote a novel called A Fine Family. That's the cover of that novel. And this was a story of 3 generations of a family, a partition novel, which Shyam Benegal, it was Penguin, and Shyam Benegal bought the rights, but that wretched fellow hasn't made the film yet. And so it was actually, I think we all owe ourselves to discover a passion. Now, passion means you don't find yourself, you create yourself. So it's a question, we're not all born like Mozart, who at the age of 3 knew that he was a musical genius. We stumble on to our passions. And that's the way I did too. I didn't study to become a writer. I had a good education which allowed me to study many things. And that's in fact very important, that for young people, reading is so important in different fields. And one of the nice things, I was an undergraduate at Harvard. And the reason I was undergraduate, because I got a scholarship. I wouldn't have been able to go if I didn't get a full scholarship. And I had, and what an American liberal arts college does is the first 2 years, you don't specialize in anything. You have what is called the general education, core curriculum, whatever they call it, but you study history, philosophy, literature, science, and then you discover the one thing you like. And I kept changing my major every 6 months because I became fond of something new. So I moved from mathematics to economics to even literature. I did some architecture. I loved buildings. I did Sanskrit. Can you believe it? That drove my parents crazy. They began to wonder what's happening to their son. I was the son of a government official, an engineer, and we were a very humble family. I mean, at that time, my mother's main expenditure was for our education and milk. I mean, she had to be very careful with every rupee that we spent. So that with their middle class insecurities, they were worried about it. And I ended up doing philosophy, and that really shocked them. But all that was a preparation. All that was a preparation. So my advice to students is read. Even if you just Google the great books or the great books program, 100 books will pop out. And just spend your summers or whatever free time you have reading the great books. And if you read it with a bunch of friends, where you can spend a few hours discussing each book, that's even better. And so that really was the preparation. It was how I discovered my passion. And I feel that we all have a duty to ourselves. We are reminded every day about our duty to others, but we forget that we have a duty to ourselves also. I mean, my definition of happiness is love the work you do and love the person you live with. Now, we're not going to talk about how to love the person you live with. For that, you read my latest book called Karma, The Riddle of Desire. That's all about how to love the person you live with. But certainly that is really the answer, long answer to a short question.
So, sir, serving in the corporate sector for a number of years and preaching the idea of dharma, how far do you feel that the corporate sector of our country is following its own dharma?
Is following its own dharma. Well, you need two things to make markets successful. You need a culture of entrepreneurship. You need a culture of savings. People save. And in our case, we're lucky. In India, we had these merchant communities, the Marwadis and the Jains and the Chettiars, the Kachis, and so on, and the Banyas, the Agarwals, and all that, Guptas, Agarwals in the north. So we've had that, and so to answer your question, I was going to move on to something else to illustrate to you that how these communities, that if look, after 91, 60 countries did the same reforms that we did. But why did India become the fastest growing economy in the world? One of the reasons, of course, China was for 20 years, and now it's our turn. But one of the reasons is that if you do reforms in a society where people know already how to create wealth, how to save money, how to invest money, you will have a bigger bang for your buck with the reforms. That, of course, then everybody, it's not to suggest that only the business communities have been successful. You've got Dalit entrepreneurs. 3,000 members of the Dalit Chamber of Commerce is very, very impressive. So actually exchange is natural amongst human beings. But it helps if it's in your DNA, as it is in the case of the business community. So remind me again the question that you asked, because I think I diverted from that.
So it basically says, do you think
the dharma,
corporate world of India is following its own dharma?
So before we discuss the corporate world of India, let's understand the dharma of the market.
Okay.
And so I said that the market needs one, entrepreneurship, and two, regulation. And frankly, the regulation also has to be light. It has to be a light touch. Because if you regulate too fiercely, then you kill entrepreneurship. As we did for 40 years. India had the unique distinction of license, permit, inspector, Raj from 1950 to 1990. And those were our lost decades. We established democracy, but we did not establish capitalism or the market. Now, the market, everybody in the market wants to maximize market share. That's the dharma of the entrepreneur or the business person. So one, you have to make sure that you don't allow monopolies to develop, because competition is the oxygen which allows the market to flourish. And so you need competition. And secondly, I think that if you leave markets to some extent, when I talk about the light touch, is that there is within the market a dharma inside working. I'll give you some examples. Right. The dharma of business is this, that if you are selling, like I have a mango seller in Khan Market. She sold me some mangoes one day. I told her these are very expensive. And she said, yeah, but they're very good. And so I said, okay, I'll take your word. And it turned out they were very bad. And then I told my friends, my neighbors, and all. And they all said, yeah, she's a cheat. And so everybody boycotted her. And so she lost out because she misclaimed what she was selling. So if you are dishonest to the consumer, you claim something that your product does, you will get maybe one-time purchase, but you won't get repeat purchase, right? So that's similarly with your employees. If you are good to your employees, if you give them freedom, if you give them, they are like SRCC students, and they are raring to go, and then you control everything when they arrive, and they then and don't give them enough freedom, and you don't give them enough training, then they will leave you because they're bright. They can go to the next company. That's the nice thing about the market. Unlike the bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, you can't say, I'm going to leave IAS and go to another IAS. You can't do that. That's a monopoly. Here in the market, you have 1,000 CEOs. If you can't become CEO of your company, there's a competitor company that will value you. So a good company makes sure it treats people well, treats people fairly. And so again, this dharma is that if you treat your people well, they will respond. More people from IIM and SRCC and all will join you. And if you treat people badly, you'll get a very bad reputation. Nobody will want to join your company. And so there's a competition for people also. The third is your suppliers. The temptation for every company is to squeeze the supplier. Aha, there are 10 people who are selling this, and I'll see if I can get the lowest price and also squeeze the last guy. Now the trouble with that is that if you squeeze the supplier too hard, then what that supplier will do is that he will have to cut corners. He'll have to, after all, he has to make some profit. And so you'll get a component from him that will be subpar, that will be low quality, and you put that component in your product, and your product will suffer. So you will fail if you squeeze yourself. So that's the dharma. You be good to your supplier, you treat the supplier. That's why good companies have long-term contracts. They are with suppliers like Maruti, etc. There are Japanese companies that have the same suppliers for 20, 25 years. You don't every year do an auction to get the lowest price. So these are just examples of the dharma of the market. That what I'm suggesting to you is that this is counterintuitive because we think the market is rapacious, bad guys, everybody is out to kill each other, etc. And selfish, etc. Greed, that's the word.
Yeah.
And the bigger point I'm trying to make about the morality of the market is that nobody has sold the market to the people. And therefore people have the wrong impression that reforms make the rich richer and the poor poorer, right? They think that being pro-market and pro-business is the same thing. That's why Modi got scared when Rahul Gandhi accused his government of being a suit boot sarkar.
Yeah.
And it was a very, and Modi got scared. And if I had been in Modi's place, I would have said, yes, we're a suit boot sarkar and we want to make every Indian have a suit boot. And all the 1 billion Indians should aspire and have suit boots. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. And then he should have explained that there's a difference between being pro-market and pro-business. Pro-market means that you stand for competition, which actually is anti-business because no businessman wants competition.
Yeah.
Every businessman wants to be a monopolist. So businessmen don't like the market because the market means they have to fight for market share. And secondly, pro-market means that to compete you have to either invest in creating better product than your competitor. That means the quality of products improves. Or you have to sell it at a lower price, so the prices come down. So look at cell phones, what the price of cell phones is today, and smartphones is today, versus the time when we had to stand in line for 10 years to get a telephone line in the old days, and how the market resulted in the cell phone revolution in our country. And most people skipped the landline. They never even had a landline. They went straight from zero phone to a cell phone. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that that the market is the consumer's best friend, the ordinary citizen's best friend. Whereas a government that's pro-business is a government that doles out licenses for bribes. And that is not crony capitalism, that's crony socialism. Because if you believe crony capitalism is all about markets, and markets that are competitive. And socialism is where we had the license, 40 years of license permit Raj, people coming with suitcases. By one airline we had in those days, Indian Airlines. And I remember if you had to come to Delhi, there were only 3 flights a day, versus 27 flights a day today. On a bad day, on a good day, 42 flights to Delhi, between Delhi and Bombay. There were 3. And you were always on 190th on the waiting list. And always somebody had to bribe somebody in Indian Airlines to get a ticket. That's how it was. That was crony socialism. So, when you talk about dharma of business, you have to bear some of these things in mind. And what is good in some ways is that no businessman on his own will behave. So you need regulation. And some of the regulations that have happened in the last 2 decades are good. I mean, there's a lot more the power given to the audit committees of boards, and there are liabilities for the directors. You can't just go and appoint your friends. I mean, people still appoint their friends as directors, unfortunately. So it's not a perfect system. But the regulation should be light. That's the point, I think.
So in 2013, you proposed the idea of a liberal party, just like Swatantrata Party was formed after independence in reaction to the Socialist Congress Party.
Right.
In 2013, we did not have a strong leader, but since then we've seen the rise of Modi government and AAP. So do you think that any of these parties fit your criteria of a liberal party?
Unfortunately not. Certainly AAP is, Kejriwal doesn't even believe in the 1991 reforms. So we are really in trouble with Kejriwal. As regards the BJP, I'll be very honest with you, I had a lot more expectations when Modi came. I was for the first time, I voted BJP. It was because of Modi. I wouldn't have voted if it was Advani. And I thought Modi, I bought into his dream, his rhetoric, that aspirational. All the other parties were promising, they were treating the voter as a victim. Congress party said, oh, you poor fellow, we must give you food free, we must give you power free, we must give you Nariga, jobs, etc. Nobody, caste parties were saying, oh, you poor Dalit, oh, you poor OBC. That was the rhetoric of the other parties. The first time in India we had an aspirational rhetoric. And I think that's what explains Modi's success. But I was saying to you that I was the first liberal who uh, who voted for Modi, and I went public. And I said, I wrote that piece in the Times of India, my Sunday column in those days. Now I come once a month on the weekday, but not on Sunday. And and I wrote, I said, vote for the demographic dividend. And my argument was that the country had a narrow window of opportunity, another 10, 15 years. We are still a very young country. You know, half the population below 26. But after that, and this youth demographics would last for only 15 years, that's all. And then we would also begin to age. So I said that the key thing was jobs. If you can give jobs to people, then you'll get a demographic dividend. And demographic dividend, you may have studied in school, in college, that it gives you a 2 percentage point kicker over your normal growth rate. And that's what happened to China, to the Far East, to the Asian tigers. They all enjoyed the demographic dividend. And so I thought that Modi was the person. When I compared him to Rahul Gandhi and Kejriwal, he was the best. But I also warned the voter that there is a downside to Modi, and that is communalism. And that is polarization. And I said that look, I don't want you to I don't want you to ignore the stain of Gujarat 2002. You should be well aware of it. But it's a calculated risk. Nothing has happened after 2002 in Gujarat. It's 2014. 12 years have gone by. Maybe he's a different guy. And therefore, maybe we can take a risk. We are always taking, in business, you're taking calculated risks. So as a voter, also, you're taking calculated risks. And so, I said, well, it's a risk. And let's hope that there is a downside, but I believe that the demographic dividend or jobs, anybody who can deliver job, because that his whole rhetoric was vikas. And you know, for 500 times he uttered vikas, he uttered Hindutva once. That was the ratio. And this was studied by an American named Walter Anderson, who had written a book on the RSS. So Walter Anderson also felt that Modi had changed. And so I think that really I felt that we should give him a chance. But I'll tell you, he made 3 promises. His first promise was that inflation was running double digit. So inflation has come down. And when people say, oh, but he was lucky, he was lucky, the oil prices went down. But would you rather have an unlucky prime minister? That's the question. And then corruption. Corruption certainly has come down. It's not gone away, certainly not at the lower levels, but the reason why our ranking has gone up to jump 30 points in the ease of doing business is because everything is pushing the digital idea. So everything is being pushed online. All forms. If you want to get into college, in the old days, you had to bribe the chaprasi to get an application form to get into SRCC. You know? Now, it's online. So, when you put everything, railway tickets online, everything. I mean, the richest people in the railways were the ticket guys who sold tickets, you know, and they were the union president, etc., railway union. Now they are the bottom half. So by putting everything online, I think that's been a success. Where Modi has failed is clearly jobs. He has not delivered the jobs. He's done a lot of good things, but if I were in his place, I would have instead of running around the world that he did the first 2 years, I would have single-mindedly focused on jobs. And there are things that even a prime minister can do if he's single-minded about it. And I think that, in fact, you can argue that he actually has destroyed some jobs because of demonetization. The demonetization came, and on the back of it came the startup of the GST. And both caused such disruption in the lives of ordinary people. And that's why I say demonetization was not only an economic failure. In fact, theoretically it was a bad idea. It was badly implemented, and whoever gave that idea to Modi, he deserves a slap on his face. And Modi goofed. It's not only an economic failure, it's a moral failure. It's a dharma. You know, the Raj Dharma is very clear. Vidura says in the Mahabharata that Raj Dharma is about helping the people. If you harm the people, it's adharma. If you help the people. Now here, 85% of the transactions in our country are in cash. How can you just remove the cash? I mean, people's livelihoods. And we are still, the numbers of 2018, whether it's CMIE or whether it's the CSO numbers, they show that jobs have been lost. So, I mean, of course, everybody is allowed to. I mean, we all make mistakes. But when the leader makes a mistake, then the whole country pays for it.
So, sir, one more last question. It would be that you said that prosperity will spread in India and China. It's not a question of if India will achieve the middle income status. It's a question of when India will achieve it. So what are the factors that will stop us from achieving that status? And secondly, once we achieve it, will the country as a whole have the political will to become a superpower?
Yeah. Okay, let's begin with the first part. What will it take us to achieve, to become a rich country? We will become, we are the fastest growing economy in the world. And that trajectory has been there since 91, and we will keep doubling if we keep growing. What we need to do is grow minimum 8%. And we did grow at 8% between 2003 and 2011. But that is not because of UPA government alone. It was the cumulative effect of reforms. Reforms during Vajpayee's, reforms during Narasimha Rao, even Deve Gowda, the dream budget of Chidambaram, all those were important factors, and it's the cumulative. Even reforms add up, and they have added up to make us the fastest growing economy in the world. So we have to keep doing the reforms. So we need labor reforms, land reforms. They were stuck because of the government didn't have a majority in the Rajya Sabha. So one, economic reforms, and I would just say that we can still follow the model of the Far East, the Tigers, which was based on labor-intensive manufactures of low-tech items, none of the high-tech. And people say, oh, but everything is turning to robotics, jobs are getting lost. I think yes, to some extent that's true, but there's still, the trade in goods in the world is $16 trillion and India's share is 1.7%. If you can take that 1.7% to 2.2%, acche din will arrive. You'll have acche din. Today, why is Modi worried about his election? Why is he becoming populist, giving this to farmers, giving this, etc.? Because he's worried. And he wouldn't have been worried if we had created jobs. And there are ways to create jobs. For example, he has got a very good program, Housing for All, by the year 2022. Now to achieve that target, by the way, housing is the largest creator of jobs in India, because we still do housing with the old-fashioned way, putting bricks and then cement, mortar, bricks, and so it's very labor-intensive. People carry bricks on their heads, and so I would say that I would focus on implementation, on getting it done. And you'll not only get everybody having a house, that will be great, but you'll create millions of jobs. So that's the kind of focus you need for labor intensity. I mean, the textiles, garments are labor intensive. And the reality is that a lot of those textile companies are leaving China. But they're not coming to India. They're going to Vietnam, they're going to Indonesia, they're going to Bangladesh, because they are much more capable in exports than we are. And so we have been neglected. In fact, export pessimism has existed. If you read India Unbound, that's one of the lessons, that export is if you are pessimistic about your ability to export, you won't export. And Modi never thought of that as an engine. He said, make in India. But it should have been make in India for the world. That was only half the expression. Because real jobs, if you want, people when they bought the Vikas story, it wasn't to become pakodewalas. It was to get hype. And in exports, you get high productivity jobs, because then you get world prices for your products. So that's really one. Yes, we will become, with these economic reforms, we will become a respectable middle class, middle income country. We will keep growing 8 to 10% a year, and you will be doubling your per capita income every 8 to 10 years. I mean, our population growth rate has now come down to less than 1.4. So you have the 9% translates already to +7. I mean, that's an Asian tiger rate of growth. So we should not be satisfied with 7%, even though world class, even though we may be the fastest growing economy in the world, we have our own issues. For us, par, as they say in golf, par rate is 8, minimum. Second part is governance. I think we will get stuck in the middle income trap. Both China and India want to reach a per capita income of $40,000 per year. Why 40? Because that's the per capita income of the United States. I think now it's about 40 plus 45, 48,000. But we won't get there. Neither will China get there. So the both will face the problem of falling into a middle income trap. Unless China fixes its politics and India fixes its governance. So India has law, China needs law, China needs the rule of law, China needs democracy, freedom. India needs governance. So you need both law and order. You know that TV show, Law and Order. China has order, India has law. And India has no order. And so you need both, law and order. And so really it's about, and what do we need in terms of governance? Well, ask yourself, why should it take us 15 years to get justice in the courts? And what does that mean? That crooks get away. So that defeats the purpose if crooks get away. Take the bureaucracy, that's the judiciary. Take the bureaucracy. Why should one person in the bureaucracy and the second neighbor in the bureaucracy, both in the same batch? One works 1 hour a day, one works 12 hours a day. One is very effective, one is ineffective. Yet both get promoted on the same day. Now, isn't that demoralizing?
Yeah.
Something is wrong when you totally follow the seniority system. So, if you want a high-performing bureaucracy, and frankly, people, little New Zealand, Australia, UK, Canada, all these countries have done reforms of the state. And that's what we need. Then police. Why should we, as a citizen, why should any of us be scared to go to a police station? All of us are scared, right? I would hate to find myself in a police station. Secondly, why should the police, the whole police, be the handmaiden of the chief minister of a state? The police is meant to uphold the rule of law. So if the minister is caught doing something wrong, the police should catch him. So that's the third reform. Fourth reform. Why should we be always in an election mode?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no issue in India is state capacity, not accountability. Every month we have an election. We have too much accountability. No time to govern. So there are answers to all these. There's administrative reform committee, judicial reform committee, police reform committees. Committees and committees are given the same reports about these. I mean, we could easily have general election once in 5 years, and 2.5 years devote 3 months to state elections and have all the state elections together. And the rest of the time is for the executive to govern and not to politic. So these are the things that I think are what will ultimately make India become a developed country, an economic. I think we are on our way to becoming the third largest economy in the next 7-8 years. But if we want to be a developed country, China is not yet a developed country. So if we want to be a developed country, then it's not economic reforms but governance reform. That's why I wrote a book called India Grows at Night, and I didn't complete the sentence, which was India grows at night when the government sleeps. So we have risen despite the state, not because of the state.
So sir, in your books, you've emphasized on the ideas of life, namely Artha, Dharma and Kama. In the current generation, do you think Artha is dominating at the expense of Dharma? And what advice will you give to the current generation to attain moksha, which is the ultimatum of one's life?
Right. Well, I think the sensible idea there is the idea of of a happy life. The way I put it was one sentence: love the work you do, love the person you live with. The other definition in the classical tradition of India, the ancient tradition, was that you had multiple goals of life, multiple goals based on multiple capabilities that human beings have. So multiple goals meant that you must be materially reasonably well off. You can't be starving, and you can't be happy if you're starving. So you must be able to look after your family and so on. The second goal was dharma. Now these dharma is the second. I mean, it could be first, second, depends on you. But dharma means moral well-being. Artha means material well-being, right? Moral well-being, if you want to sleep soundly at night, you better not break the law. You better pay your taxes, and basically be a good human being. And so that's really. And if you want to know more about it, read The Difficulty of Being Good. The third goal of life is karma, and I think India is the only culture in the world which elevated emotional well-being or sexual well-being to a goal of life, and it is. It also means pleasure, and so a fully lived life is a life of pleasure. It's not a life of. It was the idea that people shouldn't all turn into yogis. That's a mono goal. Mono goal, the only goal being moksha. And that's, unfortunately, actually we originally had only 3 goals, the first 3. Moksha came later, 1,000 years later, but it cannibalized all the other goals. And so it became the sort of, the yogi or the rishi or the renouncer became a big sort of hero in saffron robes in our country. And he preached celibacy. And you won't have any people if you practice celibacy. What would happen to the human population? So, therefore, it's a balanced idea of a balanced life. And moksha is, yes, sure, we all want to have meaning in our lives. And the nice thing about our tradition, ancient tradition, is that you can actually be a good Hindu and be an atheist. We call them Nastics, Charvaks, Lokayats in ancient India, who were atheists, but they were good Hindus. They were part of the system. And so it gives us, I'm not a believer, but I believe in moksha, because moksha means liberation from human bondage. And there's so much human bondage, even without believing in God, soul, afterlife, rebirth. You don't have to believe in any of those things, but you can still achieve moksha, which means liberation. Liberation from your ego, too much self-regard, too much greed, too much pride. All these things are things that come in the way of our being sort of happy and truly. So that would be fine.
It was great having you with us, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for coming.